Hello, today's video is about a split off-grid system, because when you've got a grid tie system, what you don't use you don't save, and you're just giving it away for the bigger companies to make money from. So what we've done is we've split our array and we've gone off grid, and we can use an ATS to transfer that so that we can use power that we make or our excess by fiddling around a little bit and doing a little bit of rewiring and how to do it. And a lot of people on the forums are asking about a detailed video of how to do it. So let's look at this hodgepodge of videos as I set up the inverter, and then we can go through that towards the end, and I will annotate some things so it's a bit more technical for those people who have actually requested that I do a more technical video.
From the still previously, what we're going to do is take these out. We don't need these are just emergency and temp things. Got our main cables coming down. We're using, I bodged together this, so it's a Prius battery, but the cables, because the lithium will go up here on this shelf, and the cables are long enough for that obviously, but this won't fit on the top shelf. So yeah, fit your batteries up, then make your cables last. It makes sense, doesn't it, really? So what we did is we pre-charged. I used it's over the other side so I can't get it. So we've pre-charged, put the batteries together, run the cables up, and at the moment I'm just getting the DC isolator to run the solar cables through. So I'll run some cables down along here, probably underneath if I can get round. Yeah, maybe. Run the cables through, DC cables in, connect it up to the isolator, and then I'll pull my solar cables. Oh, sorry, you can't see that, can you? Should have gone wide angle. I did the DC isolator, so I'll run the cables down along this joist here. There is a gap there. And then over to the connections there, and then we'll run the PV in. Don't know where I'm going to run the cables down. I could run them around the back and then loop them under, but then I'd have a crossover. Be a bit of a pain, but look a bit messy, but it'll do the job.
So let's quickly annotate that first part of the video. So what you've got is you've got your solar inverter, which I've mounted on the wall, and then obviously we're going to run PV to it, and it runs off batteries. So I've made the batteries up an EV battery, but the way that the terminals are inside it, they need to be on top of each other. They're vented on top, so they needed to have a gap between them, so I bodged together that monstrosity that you can see. I could have used cables and put them side by side and run longer cables, but you get losses in that, so there was no point in doing that. So that was just a quick and easy option. I thought it would fit, and believe it or not, it's like millimeters too big to fit on there. So you'll see that there's PV cables with MC4s coming out of the inverter. Don't do it. You shouldn't connect them up, and should avoid all connections as much as possible, so you've got as least connections, least problems, and least cost and time by running cables through. So what I actually did was take out those cables and run cables from the inverter into the DC isolator itself, rather than having MC4 connections so it can be detached. It was just put on there temporarily for a completely different reason. Right, let's go to the next clip.
So one of the first things you need to do is to know your battery chemistry, and then go through the manual and find out the floats and charges, write them down on a bit of paper. Then when you go to set it up, you should find it a lot simpler. Here we are with this box, and let's see if we can get in there and focus on it. You can see we're charging at 25 watts and we're up to 30 volts. These are, we'll go up to about a 33.6 volt float on those. As you can see, we bodged together a little battery case for these EV cells.
So in that clip we saw that we've got some batteries. These are EV batteries from a Prius, so they're nickel metal hydride batteries. They need to be vented because they work completely differently to your lithium batteries and your lead acid batteries. Their voltage is completely different too. So what do? trying to think now. So we've run the cables down. Obviously the lithium batteries, it was set up so that the lithium batteries sit on the top shelf there, but the problem is that I couldn't get the box on, so I had to go underneath and make up some short cables. So what you need to do is to go into your manual, and then you'll see the menu selection, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all the settings that you can have on there. So what you need to do first of all is look at your battery chemistry. You could be using lithium, lead acid, or nickel metal hydride. And then you take the maths from that and do your calculations on what your float charge will be, what your bulk charge will be, what your battery cutoff should be, and that's about it. So you write it down on where it is on the menu, the numbers plus what it needs to be, and then when you got it all attached up, you can go into it and actually select what you want to have selected, so that you can set it up properly. It makes it quick and easy if you've done it beforehand, and you should know what your battery is and your battery specs. If you bought a LFP or something like that, you'll find that the specs are in the manual for the battery itself.
This is really simple to set up. Screw the inverter to a board, running the AC cable and earth. You need to run an earth rod as well. Then run out to your DC isolator, mine's here. Run it in, plug it in, put it up, connect your batteries. These I'm using EV cells here. Now this one doesn't seem to go up high enough on the voltage, but as you can see these are at 30 volts, so this will just continue to charge. We're relatively early in the morning. I'm not expecting big power for about an hour. They're charging between 20 and 50 watts. But yeah, so the remarks on the battery monitors, it doesn't discriminate between what's going in and out, so it's not particularly helpful in working out the capacity, although I can reset it when they're full, and then it'll give me a drain down. But obviously as it charges up, it'll just keep on adding up, so it's basically an energy meter over the day.
So when I was building the lithium batteries, I built a box for them, and I was going to use this energy meter that you can see in the video. But the problem is though, is that if you take power in or out, it just adds up. So it doesn't subtract what you're taking out and add what you're going in to give you your even power. It's not really, it's probably an energy going through my cables meter rather than some sort of battery monitor or whatever. Keep an eye on the voltage for you, and it gives you a time remaining which goes up and down in that bottom right hand corner. Other than that, it's pretty useless. So I didn't go into detail of putting videos up showing every single step, because it's just pretty pointless. Putting an inverter on a wall, the only thing you need to do is to make sure your vents are clear, and you can access all the screws and things that you need to do up and undo, and all your switches as well. So that's probably the only thing you really need to do. These ones have two little ring loops at the top, so you just put it up and then screw straight through. So a magnetic screw on an impact driver does the trick, and it's very easy to do.
Okay, so we got our inverter set up. We've got our solar coming in, our batteries just below, not that one, a different one. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a consumer unit up on here. This is off-grid, so it's just a standard fitment as you would do with a house. So we'll crack on with that and get you some little video bits as we do it.
Okay, so before we go on, let me just mention the cables on this. This is a 3000 watt inverter. It will peak at 6000 watts. We want to make sure that our battery cables for our voltage is correct, as well as our AC output. If you go too small with these, you're going to get a house fire, so don't do it. Just make sure you do your mass calculations correctly. So when you're doing your battery connections, there's 3000 watts divided by your voltage, which I'm going to use 24 here, is 125 amps. So you need a 125 amp cable to run between your battery and your inverter. That's what your inverter will pull. Now if you're using lead acid, you will get a voltage sag. The less voltage you have, the higher the current's going to be. So you need to compensate for that. So always go up to the next biggest cable. It will run cooler. It costs more, okay, but they're not hugely long cables, so you're not really going to see a massive difference. It's not going to cost you like £60 difference, it's going to cost you £3 or £4 difference. So yeah, so go that route. Now the AC side is 3000 watts divided by the 230, which gives you a 13.04 amp cable. So we're using 2.5mm there, which is more than enough for surge currents, etc. And it's an outdoor rated cable.
Here's the budget friendly consumer unit. It's metal to comply with the new regs, well, not so new anymore. So on here we got a 16, which is our standard ring main power, and a 6 amp, which would be our lights. This one has an on-off switch, which is controlled by a RCD. So we've got everything we need in this unit. There's also a breaker on the bottom of the inverter itself. So we undo the screws, take it apart, and then what we'll do is we'll set up the wiring for it. As you can see, I've already got the cable ready there, although it's not stripped out to go straight into a consumer unit. So here's our consumer unit. Our live will go in here, in there even, and our neutral will go in there. We'll tie in our neutrals, our earths, and our lives, and we'll get rid of all these metal shards that are in there. Handy. That's bent, not even straight, but we got our little covers, little notices and things like that in a bag. Right then, let's get on with it. So all we've done is done the knockouts, put the glands in, and then just screwed it to the wood. Easy. Now this end I just takes off with a bit of red tape because it's the only one I got lying around here. So these ones go in the consumer unit. They're nice and long so they can be wound round in the box. And then we got the short end here. So what we're going to do is going to put some ferrules on that now, and then we can fit it. And we've got to have a ring terminal which fits onto the MPP solar box to earth that. This is our consumer earth and everything there, so we'll just put some ferrules on it. Okay, so we've got our consumer unit in, run our cable out to a plug socket up here, and now what I've got to do is test them for continuity and insulation, and the standard tests which you'll need to look up on of how to test it if you've got the right kit to test it. So I'm just going to go ahead and test this. You won't be able to see nothing, but there we go.
So when you go to test your cables, what you need to do is to check that they are connected properly in the terminals, that they do not have a short in there, and check that the ohms and the resistance in the cable is about right for the spec for the cable. This is to hide things like, to find hidden things like a broken cable. Now the flexi cable that I use there is unlikely to break. However, if you're using that 2.5 twin and earth that runs up there, sometimes when you bend that you can get breaks in the cables. Don't know why, but I've had them happen before, so it's always worth checking that all your cables are round in the right polarity, screwed in but not over tight because it will cut through the cables. Had that happen before. And it's pretty much simple and straightforward to wire up the consumer unit. There's probably a million videos on how to do it. They're pretty much straightforward. You've got a bus bar along the bottom, which is your live going from the RCD, or that's an RCCB, in the bottom there. So you've got your neutral, which is tied then up to the neutral bar, and then you have an earth bar, which is obviously where all your earths go. You want to check your continuity and your resistance across all your earths on there, just to make sure that it's all tickety-boo, and that's basically it. So and check your voltage as well from your inverter. It might be one thing that you want to do. Make sure those switches are off as well. Give it a quick test. And you should be good to go. If you get a problem though, you might want to call an electrician out. But what you need to do as well is bond the earth on the other end, so that it's bonded into the house earth as well, because if you go off grid you can lose the grid's earth production or protection, so you want your own. I think it's coming into legislation that now that homes will have their own earth rods for situations like this when the grid's disconnected and you lose that earth connection.
So there you go, it's all plugged in, switched on and working. These little handy things up there are pretty good. So we put in our earth cable. It's just a standard loop, nothing spectacular there. And there we go. Simple, straightforward. Off-grid power.
So as you can see, what we did is we've got the test plug there. These are really good because they will check your wiring for you. It's kind of like an idiot proof. I've put my wires around the right way, and trust me, I've seen people put the wires around the wrong way, and it's not uncommon that people will do it. So yeah, so as you can see on the last video there, we've got our watch power that plugs into the inverter. There's no AC going to this inverter, so what would happen is you'd have your grid feed, which is suitable for the connection, you know, the current that you're going to put through it to charge your batteries on grid or from the grid. But what you'd do is you'd have a cable running through, and then obviously that's going to have the MCB, so you could get a bigger consumer unit and attach it on a consumer unit, which would be bigger. So you'd have you can have a multitude of things there. So things like your DC isolator, your battery breaker, you can get DIN mounted ones of those, no problem at all. A meter, maybe you might want a meter on it. What else might you want in there? So you've got your plug sockets, light sockets, RCDs, RCBOs. You could have sort of like a 6, 7, 8-way consumer unit there to manage everything. I think it looks a lot nicer if you've got a consumer unit with your isolators all inside it, rather than having the separate isolators for everything dotted around all over the place. It means you just got one point where you can shut everything down or turn it on. Now you wouldn't want your ATS to go back through the system. Now with an ATS, which is, I'm just going to show a picture and we'll zoom around. So what we would do is the ATS has to go back out. So what we want to do is do a service interrupt, and the common way of doing this, and I'm just going to draw a quick picture and then show it to you. So we've got our mains, which are called M, and we've got our circuit, and I'm going to call it circuit 1. What we want to do is we want to go to the ATS B side, which is your backup, whereas you have the inverter then, I'm just going to call in, and then it comes out and goes back into circuit standard. So hopefully that makes sense. Right, let's have a look at this. So if you've got your, I can't even read this backwards. Okay, so that's the mains power coming into the circuit. Now you can go into your MCBs and come out the other side, and then you switch over so it goes into the corresponding screw points on the ATS. So your inverter becomes the grid and the grid becomes the backup, and then it leaves that and goes out to that circuit. So let's say it's your lighting circuit. So you've got your 6 amp fuse here, you've got a output from your inverter, comes into the ATS on the grid side of it because that's the priority, and then all you've done is cut. So basically there's no difference, it just switches here between inverter power or grid power. Pretty simple and straightforward. This is on circuits, but it can be quite costly if you're adding in and just doing circuits. So you may want to change this and put the inverter here so it takes all your load, but you need to make sure obviously that you've got enough power in your inverter and your batteries to do it. Now the other way of doing it obviously is to split load. Now you still want to have a grid charge, so you would have your consumer unit with charging big loads, and maybe fire alarms, maybe. Okay, if you've got fire and smoke alarms on your thing. So what you want to do is you have your charge circuits and your big load. So if you've got electric shower, they're probably about 8 kilowatts. So you want your loads off that, So what you'd have is 2 MCBs into a small consumer unit. Your grid comes into that grid, and then you'll go out then, so you'll have a second little unit there, and this will power, let's get right that way, there we go, and this will power your charger, so that goes off to the inverter. This goes off to your consumer unit, and if you wire it up correctly, it will just be on a split RCD with its own individual feed, and then you'll have your shower, your oven, and those high load use stuff all on that, so that it's not on your inverter, and then all your low load inverter stuff goes on the other side of it. So it's a really quick and easy way of doing it, provided you've got enough power there from your batteries, and you have enough oomph from your inverter to run those loads on those circuits that you pick. Now you might want to split that off into upstairs, downstairs, but then that will come on the other side of the consumer unit, and there'll be probably another video on that coming soon. I hope that's helped anyway. I hope that explains, but what we want to do here is split our loads so that we're not passing all our excess energy over to the grid to make their profits. What we want to do is have our own storage, so we can use our own power that we've produced, and therefore we are actually saving money, and we're getting more of a return on our investment. So at the start of this video, you might have got a little bit about the solar grid tie scam. Well, actually it is a scam, because what they were doing in the 2007 to 2013 was selling people expensive solar panels for where they had to go work to pay for them, and we're talking £10,000 to £15,000, but the power was literally fed back to the grid. It was not really, the only way it actually made any sense was people were getting paid 20 or 30 pence for the power. That's been phased out now, so it's actually not worth it. It's 4 pence, although you pay almost 30 to 40 pence to buy that power back when you need it. So you're paying a lot more. So how it worked is that if you're going grid tie, you want a small system that uses just for your daytime loads, and that can encompass a weekend as well when you're at home. But where they're small, they have deficits, and I'll put up an image of what ours looks like over a day, and as you'll see, there's a decline from our base. Now our base load at the top of that's about 180 watts. As you go down, you'll see the solars kicking in. We've got kettles and things going on, so we get a little bit of use from the grid there, and then all of a sudden we've got this massive, great big 4.4 kilowatts used, which is obviously everything that goes in excess of what either the PV is producing or the inverter can produce. So all of that extra we have to buy from the grid. So all of that day, you know, all those that drop down, we're pumping in you know, a couple of kilowatts back into the grid, where we could have used it on that 4.4, and that would have been a lot less. And this is where it becomes a bit of a scam, because if you're not using it, you're not saving any money, and if you can't store it, you can't use it at a later time when you need more power, but you'll pay at least 3 times more for your electric. So I hope that makes that probably a little bit clearer as to why it was always a scam, because people don't use solar when they're out working to pay for their solar panels, and so they weren't really making the money. Only the people who got fit, and that's obviously defunct now quite a while, although they have got seg, and about 4 to 10 pence is what people are getting, up to about 40 pence depending when you're producing, which is usually after the solar hours. So you need massive storage to feed back into the grid to maximise your return there. It's a little bit of an effort, and only worth it in certain cases. So hopefully this video has helped you understand how we set up quickly a off-grid. So what we didn't go into in the video was obviously splitting your array and doing your array calculations to lower your grid-tied array and still keep enough in there to charge your battery system for your off-grid. That's pretty simple and straightforward maths. I might do it in another video called Splitting the Array. That'll be a catchy title, won't it? So keep your eye out for that. I'll probably get it done in a couple of days. If you like the video, subscribe to the playlist not the channel. You'll probably find I often, if I see a decent video which is a bit informative, I'll attach it to the playlist, and you can hunt through, because that's where we keep all our solar ones. We don't tend to do so much or publish the other alternatives related to other work that I do or have done. But if you liked it, click like. If you want to subscribe, please do so. Bye.